Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Slice and Dice. This one's a bit more with a crystal globe in front of us because we're going to do some predictions on how search is going to evolve. I'm joined by,
Dan, I'm the Senior SEO Specialist at ClickSlice.
and you should really know who I am. I'm Yulia, Operations Director at ClickSlice. So I think kind of like the first curiosity everyone has is about the search bar.
Mm-hmm.
How will that look in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's changing pretty aggressively at the moment. Now you have like the AI integration into Google. It's like right there now. I think they've been fairly clear that they're going to try and integrate that more, which is obviously something that all SEOs need to be focused on as it starts to change. But I think like the big shift in the industry is everything's moving towards being a kind of full service agent. So
Yeah.
if you want to book a holiday, it's going to do the whole thing for you. It's no longer just, I think I want to go here, list 10 travel agents, and then I'm going to have to go through that process. The agent's going to do all of that for you. And I think the area where we're first seeing this start to take effect is in America right now in ChatGPT. You've got integrations for both Etsy and Shopify that are being rolled out actively, where you can search for something, eventually will recommend an Etsy product or a Shopify product, and you can purchase through ChatGPT, assuming the integration's been set up by the company itself. If you think this is the first iteration of this and the pace at which AI is moving, it makes sense that in 2 years that becomes a commonplace feature that a lot of people use because it's fundamentally better. If you're searching for something and there's no brand loyalty, there's no particular reason you need to go to a website, why would you not buy off ChatGPT in the same way you buy off Amazon? The only difference is now you don't have to spend 20 minutes going through all the reviews, and I think this brand is the same as this, but you don't need to do that anymore. ChatGPT and the kind of agent functionality that's being built in is going to do all of that for you. So
it'd be based on your past behavior and shopping, basically experience and all of that. Your assistant, your
exactly,
virtual
that's what they're
shopping
trying
assistant.
to become, and they're getting there. It's very clear that this is starting to happen. It's not an if, it's a when now.
Yeah, and I think this is also so brands will have to anticipate a lot customers when it comes to seasonality, customer behavior, what they're gonna buy. I think that's gonna play a lot into how assistants also and LLMs suggest back, products or anything that you're looking to buy online.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's where the change in our industry is coming from. It's no longer just about ranking, a keyword to a particular page. It's now about making sure that your brand is referenced as the solution to the problems that people are entering in. And these problems are not the problems that people would search into Google, because if you searched a 2-sentence query into Google, you're not getting any result that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you put it into ChatGPT, it's going to do all of those searches for you. It's going to aggregate the results, and then it's going to recommend the best possible brand for you. So the pivot now that companies need to be thinking on is, how do we make sure that when that aggregating process is happening, we're at every single interval where there is a check going on. And then once you know what those are, you can then adapt your content to that, and then fundamentally you'll get the recommendations that you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a lot more detailed and even like geo specifically. And I know it's already there and you can search for a keyword and add a location next to it, and you can optimize for that with traditional search as well. But I think with AEO, so for example, all LLMs say I'm searching in, I don't know, Perplexity, Claude for an SPF near me, or SPF store, cosmetic stores near me. I think it's gonna take into consideration where you're based, your past shopping, your past products that you shopped for, including your skincare needs. So, for example, if I have dry skin, it's literally gonna recommend an SPF for whether that is London based, it's rainy, humidity, whatever, based on all of these. Yeah, it's going to be so much more personalized. And I think that's where brands will need to look into a lot more than they do now.
Yeah, absolutely. The demands to create longer tail content is becoming pretty apparent. And we're seeing it in the results that we're getting. The more kind of niche the article that we're making, the more it starts to show up in these AI engines that we're able to track in a number of different ways. I would say on the location front as well, this is something that a lot of people are overlooking. AI crawlers read the front page of Google for their query. So if you're searching for SPF near me or suitable for, it's going to look through the Google Maps reviews. It's going to see who's ranking where and for what, and how many reviews you have and all of those kind of things. And they go into that aggregate decision that it makes that ultimately determines what it is that it's going to recommend for you. So with AEO, it is really an extension of your traditional SEO activity. You should be seeing that everything that you're doing for your normal SEO is going to feed into that. There are new things that you now have to do, but you cannot take your foot off the gas with traditional SEO.
Yeah, no,
and you think it's not gonna work. It's what we've seen is the brands that we'd already built up and were strong, they naturally had a jump in AEO. When we've added in these additional AEO activities, they're getting a much stronger kind of amplified effect than the brands that never had
Yeah,
strong
definitely.
SEO in the.
And it's because you kept building that authority and relevancy,
So,
which still matter a lot, especially authority matters if you get cited as a source in LLMs. But also, how do you think structured data will play into AI citing you more or your products or your collection pages, for example?
yeah, I mean, structured data, which typically in the SEO space, it's referring to schema for the
Yeah.
most part. I mean, it's not only what it refers to, but that's mainly what it's referring to. Schema isn't directly read by AI crawlers. This has been debated so much recently, but the conclusion is that the way that AI crawlers read pages, they break all of the individual text and code pieces down into individual tokens and it then
Yeah.
sequences
Yeah,
in
yeah,
its
I've
own,
seen that.
which means schema and the function that it has isn't read in the way that it's read by, say, a Google crawlbot. However, the thing that everybody seems to miss is that schema is what part of what it helps do is get you featured in rich snippets in Google search results. So if AI crawlers are
Yeah.
reading the front page of Google and you're in 4 or 5 of the rich snippet placements, that's all going to get read and it's all going to feed into that recommendation that it's going to make. So schema is super important anyway. It's overlooked by, I'd say, 80 to 90% of the clients that come into us. Once it's implemented, you see a big lift in your traditional SEO. It's very complicated. It's not an easy thing to try and implement yourself, but once you've implemented it, you'll see a lift. If you then get, which is the thing that you're aiming for, the rich snippet placements, you'll then get a boost in the AEOs because they're now able to see not
Yeah.
just the references it's getting from other websites, but also those rich snippets that come up every time they do a query for any number of particular issues that you may be searching for.
Yeah, interesting. I think clients are gonna love that, but they need someone to implement
Yeah,
it
it's
for them.
not. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where it's like it's super high impact, but actually quite
Yeah.
complicated. There's a few where it's high impact, but actually low, like,
Yeah.
internal linking, for example. Like, you don't need to have a lot of experience in SEO to figure out how to do that. You can watch 1 or 2 YouTube videos. You can probably go quite far
Yeah.
with that. Schema is not the same. It kind of falls roughly into that area where you need to have a bit of developer knowledge. You need to fundamentally understand how sites are built and how they show certain code elements in certain orders. If, however, you can implement it and implement it correctly, it's a massive, easy win area.
Yeah.
Maybe not easy win, but it's a win area. So things like schema are very complicated for most average business owners to implement. For smaller ecom brands, there's a lot of fear that they're not going to be able to compete in this area now in terms of AI optimization because it's so complex. What would you say to those kind of smaller brands that are kind of worried that it's a little bit out of there?
I'd say the best solution would be to lean into niche, be the expert at something specific, not at everything, because LLMs reward agility, not scale. So you would have to master a specific topic. And you can do that, especially with content. The more niche you are, it's the same with traditional SEO. The more niche you are, the better chances are for you to rank for a lot of specific terms. And it's
So,
going to be
yeah.
the same with LLMs, especially because I've said they reward agility and not scale. And it's easier for them, even with responses. They prefer shorter responses or to the
Yeah.
point responses rather than just the blocks of text or
Yeah,
too
giant
much
walls of tech. Yeah,
information.
doesn't
Yeah.
work.
And I think, since we're on this topic, how do you think businesses should adapt their AEO and SEO tactics?
I would say the one thing that we're pretty clear on warning people about at the moment is don't just pump the brakes on traditional SEO and just pivot into AEO. There's very few agencies that actually know how to do AEO at this point, like very few, probably less than 10. Most activity or most benefit that you're going to get from AEO if you don't do it like in a very specialized way is just continuing with good SEO. You will still get cited, you'll still get referenced. While they are different techniques that we're seeing stronger advantages for in the AEO space, if you just stayed the course with good SEO, you're going to get cited.
Yeah.
It's an inevitability ultimately. The one thing that we seem to get asked a little bit more frequently at the moment is people are like, should we just do AEO and stop SEO? And it's like,
Yeah,
no,
no,
the
no.
AEO is an extension of SEO. While in a perfect world, you do both at the same time. If you have to prioritize one, prioritize traditional SEO first. Once you've saturated that, once you're starting to see a slight decrease in your ROI in that, then start to look into the more complex, newer fields of AEO, where you'll start to see, effectively a new channel of traffic coming in.
Yeah, and I think my not crazy prediction is you said it's AEO is an extension of SEO
Mm.
now. I think in the future they're gonna merge into just one
Yeah,
discipline,
yeah,
AEO, SEO, and
hmm
UX, just because it's user experiences
yeah,
at the core of
hmm
everything. And so you need to stop treating them as separate
yeah,
techniques and start looking into how you can even your team. So if you're an agency, how you train your team and how you structure departments, because you're going to be left behind if you try to structure them separately. I'm sure they'll definitely merge together and you'll be doing both SEO and AEO at the same time rather than
hmm
an add-on or starting with one. I think they're going to be a necessity, both of them,
yeah, absolutely.
quite soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the moment the distinction that we have and the reason why everyone's separating it is because you can't really track AEO with
Yeah.
traditional SEO techniques. So there's no way of really knowing if you're using, Ahrefs or SEMrush. There's no way to know if your AEO activities are actually producing results just yet. There are certain tools in there, but they've been proven to be wildly ineffective for the most part. There's now specialist tools in the AEO space that we have access to where you can actually see what's working and what's not. Those tools are enterprise level tools.
Yeah.
They're not accessible to the average business. They're not accessible to the average agency for the most part. So at present, there is definitely this
Yeah, there's
distinction, but
yeah.
yeah, like you said, it's an inevitability. Eventually, they're going to fuse, and it will all be part of the same thing because fundamentally, search will be completely changed into being an amalgamation of both.
Yeah. And with brands, I have another crazy prediction. I think, and I'm actually going to ask you first, what do you think is something that brands are not yet ready for or are going to accept harder than normal?
That your previous authority doesn't matter as much as it used to. So what's very clear from what we've seen so far is the more specialized you are, the more AO is preferring to answer engines are preferring to recommend you. If you are a super established brand that does loads of different things, you're not actually getting recommended that often for those things. Brands that have very specific content areas that they focus on, that have UGC around it, that's feeding into it from Reddit, Quora, where people have said, actually, I had great success with X brand, or I tried X supplement, these really work for me. Those kind of signals don't typically go to the bigger brands,
Yeah.
particularly like Amazon. Not many people are like, oh, go to Amazon. They had the better, they'll reference the specific brand and
Yeah.
the specialist. So those kind of things, while I don't think it's, the next 2 years, people like Amazon are going to lose a huge amount of market share to more specialized brands. I do think 5 to 10 years in the future, where this becomes a very different landscape than what we're currently dealing with, I think those brands will be very shocked by how much ground they're going to lose to these
Yeah.
specialist businesses.
Yeah. My other prediction, I think it's more related to UX, and I think it's brands will find it very hard to accept that they have to lose control over how their products are presented in AI,
Mm,
just because it's already starting. It's you already lose control because it pulls reviews, it pulls sentiment from your reviews, it pulls sentiment from discussions that other users have on Reddit. You have literally no
no
control
control,
there.
yeah.
And I think brands really need to get used to that, unfortunately, and just try to do their best on their own website where they can, control everything to counterattack that. And
Yeah.
so I do have an example. We work with a client and they actually they don't have out of stock necessarily that it's not coming back. All of their customers know that if it's out of stock, they can actually pre-order.
Yes. Yeah.
But actually in ChatGPT, it says that the cons of this brand is that they don't have in-stock products, which can be very frustrating. And I think this is really going to be hard for brands to accept, that you completely lose control over how users perceive you because they're outside of your website.
So,
It's not your asset there. So it's just
it's a really good point. Yeah, really
quite
good
hard.
point.
And I think kind of like my last crazy prediction is brands is shopping outside of the website, so without branding.
Yeah.
And I think branding is super important nowadays. And I still think it is. Like for myself, I want to relate to a brand and I want to feel like we align with our values and how they work. But then you've got TikTok and everything where you don't even have time to understand who's selling you that product. You just love it so much and the hype is so big around it that you already buy it. So I think we're at a, how do you call it when there's opposites?
Like crossroads?
We're at crossroads now between branding and people not caring about that. But with AI, I think branding is going to go away, branding in its own definition, and you will be left with consumer feelings and how consumers perceive you, which can be different because you dictate your branding, whereas consumers dictate how they see your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good point again.
Thanks. Yeah. And, time will tell. But I really enjoyed this episode. I like thinking about possibilities.
Super awesome.
And that's it for today. See you in the next one. Like, subscribe, share, and bye.
There you go.